Imagine a dark vault deep inside Buckingham Palace. Among dozens of cases, each labeled in the careful script of royal jewelers, there is one known only to a handful of experts. Inside lies a tiara that seems to have captured the rays of a winter sun. Light, flexible, almost fluid in its design, it was named the sapphire sunray bandeau. Its structure echoed flashes of light. Rows of diamonds fanned out from the center like beams of the sun, and at its heart shone a large sapphire framed by more diamonds. That sapphire could even be detached and worn separately as a brooch. Historians still argue about where this jewel really came from. Some believe it once belonged to the Russian Empress Maria Feodorovna, mother of Nicholas II, and after the revolution, it was among the treasures sold from the imperial legacy and quietly bought by the British. Others think its origin is less romantic, that it was commissioned in London, made in the Russian style of the late 19th century. But it is precisely this uncertainty that gives the tiara its aura of mystery, as if it carries the breath of an empire that no longer exists. The bandeau first appeared in public in the early 20th century on the head of Queen Mary. At times, she even replaced the central sapphire in the diamond sunray bandeau with her carved emerald brooch. After Queen Mary's death in 1953, the sapphire bandeau, believed to have once belonged to Empress Maria Feodorovna, was inherited by the Queen, but it was most often worn by her sister, Princess Margaret. Elizabeth II's younger sister had a rare gift for wearing jewels so that they became part of her legend, and it was Margaret who made the sunray bandeau recognizable. In the 1950s, she wore it on tours of the Caribbean, dazzled in it at official receptions, and in Trinidad, her sapphire-embroidered blue gown matched the central stone of the tiara perfectly. The photographs of those years filled magazines everywhere, and the jewel became known as the tiara of the rebel princess. But what happened next remains a mystery. By the early 1960s, Margaret had stopped wearing the piece. Later, it vanished from public view entirely. No more exhibitions, no portraits, no appearances at court. Historians, jewel critics, collectors all tried to trace its path. Some insist it returned to the royal vaults, waiting for another debut. Others believe it stayed with Margaret's children. Yet for more than half a century, the public has not seen it again. And that is where our story begins, because the sapphire sunray bandeau is an example of the phantom jewels in Elizabeth II's vast collection, pieces that appeared once in the spotlight, then dissolved back into the darkness of the vaults, leaving behind the sense that they hold not only diamonds, but also an untold chapter of history. Now, let us turn to another mystery of the royal treasury, a complete paru that was once among the most striking in the Windsor family, and then disappeared without a trace. This is the Persian turquoise paru. The set was a true treasure in the Art Deco style. A tall tiara, necklace, bracelets, and earrings, all made of turquoise and diamonds. Turquoise was not chosen by accident. In the 1920s, it was considered a symbol of youth and freshness, perfectly suited to the young Duchess of York, the future Queen Mother, Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. In 1923, it became her wedding gift from King George V and Queen Mary. The young Duchess wore the turquoise pieces often, their gentle color highlighting her light, modern style in an era when gold and bright stones were coming back into fashion after the severe Victorian years. But fate had other plans. The tiara, nicknamed the Triumph of Love for its heart-shaped motifs, all but vanished from her head after the 1930s. When her husband unexpectedly took the throne in 1936, the new queen consort needed jewels of greater grandeur. The modest, though beautiful turquoise set slipped into the shadows. In the early 1950s, when her younger daughter Margaret turned 21, the paru reappeared as a symbolic gift. The tiara, earrings, and necklace marked the young princess's coming of age and accompanied her to her first major events. Margaret wore the turquoise frequently. Photographs from the late 1950s often show her in the set, a bold contrast to the formal diamond jewelry favored by her sister, the Queen. Then came a turning point. After Margaret's death in 2002, parts of her private collection were sold at auction to cover taxes, and many expected the turquoise set to be among the lots. But it never appeared. It was not listed in the Christie's catalog. The absence sparked speculation. Some say the jewels were returned to the royal collection, locked away with the Queen Mother's treasures. Others are convinced Margaret's children kept them in private hands, quietly and deliberately. And so, the Persian turquoise parure became the symbol of a lost chapter in Britain's jewelry history. Unlike other tiaras that occasionally woke up for a grand appearance, a wedding, a state banquet, this turquoise crown seemed to dissolve into thin air. And now we come to yet another enigma, a tiara that appeared in the records like a mirage, and then disappeared again, leaving behind only speculation and a trace of mystery. This was the double meander tiara, one of the rarest and most debated jewels in the Windsor story. Its uniqueness is clear even in its name. A classic Greek meander is a continuous key pattern. Here it was doubled. 2 rows of interlocking Greek keys, one above the other, created a strict, almost architectural structure. Above them rose a diamond aigrette, a motif shaped like a feather or a flame. Together, they gave the tiara a monumental presence, as though it belonged not to a royal ball, but to a temple of ancient gods. Experts believe the double meander may have entered the royal collection with the famous Greville bequest, the treasure left in 1942 by Mrs. Greville, that eccentric society figure who willed her vast jewelry to Elizabeth Bodleian. In the list of her gifts was a tiara described simply as a Greek key. But was it the double meander itself, or another variation of the motif? No one knows for sure. And here's the real hook. For decades, nothing was said about this tiara. No photographs, no public appearances. It seemed to have melted away into the vaults. Then, in 2005, during a state banquet for the visiting Chinese delegation in London, the press and the public noticed a jewel on Princess Anne's head that looked suspiciously like the double meander tiara. The photos taken that night were too unclear to settle the question, but jewelry experts were convinced it could be nothing else. Since then, the double meander has been surrounded by intrigue. If it truly was the tiara Anne wore, then it never disappeared at all and still rests safely in the royal collection. If not, perhaps it was another, lesser-known jewel that just happened to echo the rare Greek design. But this uncertainty is what makes the story so compelling. Among all the jewels Elizabeth II never wore, the double meander tiara holds a special place. It feels like a shadow from the past, a reminder of riches that may exist, but can't be proven. From here, we move on to tiaras that became symbols of youth, jewels worn by princesses at their first appearances, but never by Elizabeth II herself. The most famous of them is the Cartier halo tiara. This diadem is often seen in photographs and magazines, but its history carries a quiet irony. It was bought in 1936 by the Duke of York, the future George VI, from Cartier in London. At the time, he wanted to delight his wife, the Duchess of York, later the Queen Mother. Her collection of jewels was still modest compared to the older royal ladies. Light and elegant, the halo was made of 16 graceful scrolls set with more than 700 round diamonds and nearly 150 baguette-cut stones. Its style fit perfectly with the mood of the late 1930s, delicate, luminous, without heavy grandeur. But everything changed within months. After the abdication of Edward VIII, the Duke of York became king and his wife became queen. From that moment, the small, charming halo looked too modest for a monarch's consort. And so, in 1944, when Princess Elizabeth turned 18, the tiara was given to her as a birthday gift. In wartime, when new jewels were difficult to acquire, passing on one's own tiara was a gesture of both love and continuity. And here lies the paradox. Elizabeth II never wore the Cartier halo,
Perhaps there was no occasion for it during the war years, and when peace returned, she was already queen, her head crowned with tiaras of an entirely different scale, grand, official, loaded with state symbolism. The halo remained forever a princess's tiara. But that role became its destiny. Princess Margaret wore it at her sister's coronation in 1953, and in that moment, it became part of history. Later, the halo passed to Princess Anne, who wore it as her first tiara in the late 1960s. Decades later, in 2011, the whole world saw again on Catherine Middleton's head at her wedding to Prince William. That choice sparked worldwide fascination. A young bride in a light and airy tiara once gifted to a young princess in wartime. Today, the halo remains in the royal collection, and every appearance it makes is an event. Yet its story is a curious one. It is associated with Elizabeth II precisely because she never wore it, as if it was never meant for her, but always for the younger women stepping into royal life. And now we come to one of the most mysterious of the sleeping treasures, Queen Mary's diamond bandeau, a jewel that lay hidden in the vaults for 6.5 decades, as if waiting for its moment. Its story began in 1893 when the young Princess Mary of Teck, the future Queen Mary, married Prince George, later George V. As a wedding gift from the County of Lincoln, she received a small but refined diamond brooch, a modest token of respect and gratitude. For nearly 40 years, it remained a quiet piece in her collection until Mary decided to give it a new life. In 1932, the jeweler's Garrett built an entire tiara around the brooch, a sleek Art Deco bandeau. Its structure consisted of 11 interlinked sections, a rhythm of oval and diamond shapes, all set with brilliant stones. At its center gleamed the original brooch, the heart around which the entire tiara was created. Queen Mary wore the diamond bandeau only a few times, mostly at less formal events, like film premieres. For parades or state banquets, she always chose more monumental tiaras. When she passed away in 1953, the jewel was inherited by her granddaughter, Elizabeth II.
And here is where the most surprising twist begins. Throughout her long reign, the Queen never once appeared in this tiara. Not in portraits, not at banquets, not even in passing glimpses. It was as if it had vanished, a forgotten piece locked away in the vaults. Then came May 2018. The world held its breath for the wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. When the bride stepped out of the car at St. George's Chapel, the crowd gasped. On her head glittered the long-forgotten Queen Mary's diamond bandeau. In that instant, a jewel that had spent decades in darkness became the centerpiece of global headlines. The effect was electrifying. The internet filled with photographs, specialists dissected every detail, and jewelry historians pulled old archives from the shelves. For many, it was nothing short of sensational. A jewel almost no one had spoken of suddenly turned into one of the most iconic images of a royal wedding in the 21st century. And here again, we see the same familiar pattern from Elizabeth II. She had the chance to wear this bandeau dozens of times, but she set it aside. And when it finally did appear, it had far more impact than if she had used it in everyday royal life. Queen Mary's diamond bandeau was a jewel whose power lay not in being seen often, but in being waited for. That waiting is what made it legendary. Meanwhile, it is time for another story, one that carries dynastic roots, exile, marriage, and the inheritance of several generations. This is the story of Princess Andrew's meander tiara, famous for its strict Greek geometry. Its journey began far from Britain. The tiara belonged to Princess Alice of Battenberg, mother of Prince Philip. Alice was born at Windsor Castle, but grew up across Europe and married Prince Andrew of Greece, son of King George I of Greece. Her life was marked by hardship, years in exile, long separations from her family, even time spent in seclusion and in a clinic. Yet among her few prized possessions was this diamond meander.
The design was unique. The Greek key pattern ran in a rhythm of straight lines and angles, with a laurel wreath, an ancient symbol of victory, at its center, and diamond flowers on either side. It was a jewel that perfectly reflected the Greek roots of her family. In 1947, when Princess Elizabeth married Prince Philip, Princess Alice gave her new daughter-in-law this tiara as a wedding gift. It seemed certain that such a personal and historic gift would find a special place in the young queen's wardrobe. But history took a different course. Elizabeth II never once appeared in public wearing it. No photographs, no portraits, as though the gift remained quietly stored away. Instead, in the 1960s, the tiara was passed to her daughter, Princess Anne. For Anne, it became her very first real crown. She wore it in official portraits and at public events, its strict geometric lines in perfect harmony with her own character. Independent, direct, without unnecessary flourish. Many years later, in 2011, the tiara returned to the spotlight when Anne's daughter, Zara Phillips, chose it for her wedding to Mike Tyndall. And so, a jewel that began its story in Greece continued to link the generations of the British royal family. This tale is striking because through the meander tiara, one can trace an entire chain, from Princess Alice, a woman marked by tragedy and exile, through Elizabeth II, the queen who chose not to wear it, to Anne, the princess who made it part of her image, and on to Zara, a representative of the modern generation. The meander tiara is more than a jewel. It is a bridge between nations, eras, and destinies. And once again, we see Elizabeth II's characteristic gesture. She herself did not wear it, but she preserved it, allowing it to shine at just the right time, but on others. Now, let us step back to the early 20th century, when the future Queen Mother was still the young Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. It was then that one of the most touching and personal jewels in royal history appeared, the Strathmore Rose Tiara. In 1923, as Lady Elizabeth prepared to marry the Duke of York, the second son of King George V of Games 5, her father, the Earl of Strathmore, wanted to give her more than a jewel. He wanted a symbol of love and family devotion. He commissioned Garrard to create a tiara that would embody tenderness. Its design was made of roses, diamond flowers, each of which could be detached and worn as a separate brooch. To make it even more versatile, a set of sapphires was included so that the roses could shine either with the cool light of diamonds or the blue fire of sapphires. Another special feature was its flexibility. The tiara came with two frames. One allowed it to be worn low across the forehead, in the fashionable bandeau style of the Great Gatsby era, and the other was a more traditional frame to be placed higher on the head. It was a true Art Deco masterpiece, embodying the fashion and spirit of the time.
In the 1920s, the young Duchess of York wore the Strathmore Rose with delight. Photographs of her in the tiara became symbols of the interwar era. Lightness, freshness, a smile, and floral motifs that earned her the image of the people's bride. In an age when Queen Mary shone in enormous, towering crowns, a garland of roses seemed more suited to a princess than a monarch. Gradually, the tiara disappeared from her wardrobe and spent decades in the shadows. After the Queen Mother's death in 2002, the jewel passed to Elizabeth II. It seemed destined to share the fate of many others, endless years in the vault, but fate decided otherwise. In November 2023, during the state banquet held for the President of South Korea, the audience gasped. On the head of the Princess of Wales, Catherine, sparkled the Strathmore Rose tiara. It was a breathtaking return. Exactly 100 years after it was first gifted to a young bride, the tiara once again shone under the chandeliers of Buckingham Palace. In that moment, a father's gift became a symbol of continuity and a new era. The Strathmore Rose is a jewel that began as a family keepsake and became a symbol of memory and tradition. Now it's time for another Art Deco masterpiece, one that began as a bold experiment and became a lasting symbol of the 1920s, the lotus flower tiara. Its story did not begin as a tiara at all, but as a necklace. In 1923, when Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon married the Duke of York,
the future George VI, her new husband gave her a wedding gift, an elegant garroted necklace of pearls and diamonds designed in the fashionable festoon and meander style of the time. But the young Duchess had not only taste, but daring. She decided the necklace could become something far more striking. Just months later, she returned to Garrett with a request: transform it into a tiara. And so was born what we now call the lotus flower tiara. Diamonds and pearls were arranged in lotus-shaped motifs, crowned with delicate diamond arches. The symbolism was clear. The lotus flower represents renewal, harmony, and beauty. In the 1920s, the age of jazz, tango, and change, this jewel perfectly reflected the spirit of the times. The young Duchess of York wore it often, for portraits and at society events. It became one of her signature looks, light, graceful, yet unmistakably modern. Her smile, paired with the lotus flower, turned into an almost iconic image of the interwar years. In time, the tiara passed to the next generation. In 1959, the Queen Mother gave it to her younger daughter, Princess Margaret. For Margaret, who embodied glamour and freedom, the lotus flower tiara was a perfect fit. She wore it to balls, receptions, and photo sessions, making it part of her bold, youthful image. In 1993, the tiara returned to the spotlight when Margaret loaned it to her daughter-in-law, Serena Stanhope, for her wedding to David Linley. That day, it became a symbol of continuity within the family.
Then it disappeared again. For years, no one saw the lotus flower, and many believed it had stayed in the Linley family's private collection. But in 2013 came a surprise. The Duchess of Cambridge, Catherine, appeared in the tiara at a diplomatic reception. 2 years later, in 2015, she wore it again for a state banquet in honor of the Chinese president. The world now knew the lotus flower had returned to the royal collection. Its most recent public outing came in 2023, when the Duchess of Edinburgh, Sophie, wore it once more. The lotus flower tiara had traveled a long road, from a daring transformation of a necklace in the 1920s to a mark of continuity in the 21st century. More than any other jewel, it shows how the royal family treated its legacy, transforming, preserving, and bringing it back at the right moment. Elizabeth II herself never wore the lotus flower, but she kept it safe, ensuring each generation could find its own reflection in it. Now we come to perhaps the most unusual transformer in the royal collection, the Cartier bracelet bandeau. This jewel proves that even the strictest traditions can be combined with play and imagination when guided by the talent of jewelers and the boldness of their patrons. Between 1923 and 1925, the Duke of York, the future George VI, gave his young wife Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon 5 Cartier bracelets. Each was an Art Deco masterpiece: clean lines, precise geometry, and first-class gemstones. One was set with sapphires, another with emeralds, a third with rubies, and 2 were entirely diamond. Together, they were like a rainbow turned into jewelry. The young Duchess loved wearing them, sometimes all 5 at once. Their sparkle perfectly matched the sleeveless gowns of the 1920s, when evening dresses demanded bold accents on the arms. But Cartier went even further. In 1925, the jewelers created a special frame, a light metal mount that could hold 3 of the bracelets at once. In an instant, they could be transformed into a tiara. The result was the Cartier bracelet bandeau, a jewel that could shift from wrist to crown in minutes. Imagine it. One evening, Elizabeth dazzled with 5 bracelets on her arms, and the next, the same jewels formed a tiara on her head. Photographs from the late 1920s show her wearing this unusual creation at balls and cultural events. But when her husband became king in 1936, and she became queen consort, the playful bracelet tiara seemed too lighthearted for her new role. The mount vanished from use, and the bracelets returned to their original form. Decades later, in the 1970s, the Queen Mother gave the bracelets to her daughter, Elizabeth. The Queen wore them often, but only as bracelets, paired with evening gowns at state banquets, on official portraits, and diplomatic occasions. In the 21st century, they found life again, this time on the wrists of Camilla, wife of Charles.
In 2024, she wore the emerald bracelet from this legendary set at a literary evening, giving new sparkle to a jewel almost a century old. And what became of the frame that once turned the bracelets into a tiara? On that point, even the best-informed historians are silent. Perhaps it still lies in the vaults, hidden among the royal treasures. And who knows, perhaps one day the Cartier bracelet bandeau will reappear in its most unusual form, reminding the world of a time when jewels were not just symbols of power, but also of play and fashion.
And now we turn to one of the most mysterious pieces in the royal collection, the Tech Crescent tiara. If the Cartier halo or the lotus flower occasionally appeared on young princesses, this masterpiece seemed to carry a curse of invisibility. Its origins go back to the 19th century. The tiara was created for Princess Mary Adelaide of Cambridge, better known as the Duchess of Teck, mother of Queen Mary. She inherited stones from her aunt, Princess Mary, Duchess of Gloucester, daughter of George III. Not content to leave them sitting in a box, Mary Adelaide commissioned a tiara that blended severity with symbolism. The base was made of 20 diamond crescents, facing forward or back depending on how they were set. Between them sparkled 3 diamond roses. This gave the Tech Crescent tiara a dual character. By day, it could look open and airy. By night, dark and solemn. The design was almost unique, perfectly reflecting the Victorian taste for lunar symbolism and romantic suggestion. The tiara passed to Queen Mary in the early 20th century, but she was never photographed in it. In 1936, she gave it to her daughter-in-law, the future Queen Mother. Once again, fate kept it from the spotlight. Only one confirmed appearance survives. In 1939, during a banquet in Canada, Elizabeth wore the Tech Crescent. After that, through the war and post-war years, the jewel disappeared. When the Queen Mother died in 2002, the tiara passed to Elizabeth II. And again, the same pattern. The Queen never wore it. Instead, she placed it on long-term loan to Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, along with 2 other jewels. But unlike the others, the Tech Crescent never appeared on Camilla's head. That silence makes the tiara unique. Unlike the Cartier halo or the Greville honeycomb, which enjoyed many public outings, the Tech Crescent always chose the shadows. Why? Perhaps it was considered too old-fashioned. Perhaps its lunar symbolism felt outdated next to more modern crowns. Or perhaps there was an unspoken rule in the family that some jewels were meant to be kept, not shown. Now it is time for perhaps the most monumental and symbolic of all the invisible crowns, the Delhi Durbar tiara. This was never just a piece of jewelry. It was the stage set of an empire built in diamonds and platinum. The story begins in 1911, when India prepared for a grand ceremony, the Delhi Durbar, the imperial gathering that proclaimed George V and Queen Mary as Emperor and Empress of India. For such an event, a new symbol was required. Queen Mary decided to create a tiara that would outshine every other. She sent her old loop tiara to the jewelers of Boucheron, ordering it to be dismantled and remade into something far more majestic. The result exceeded expectations. The Delhi Durbar tiara became a true masterpiece of early 20th century craftsmanship. Its design was a towering crown of platinum and gold, dripping with diamonds, with garlands and intertwining S-shaped scrolls. At first, it was set with 10 enormous emeralds from the Cambridge collection. Later, Queen Mary instructed her jewelers to prepare settings for even more significant stones, the legendary Cullinan II diamond, and 4 other cuts from the same colossal crystal. This meant the tiara could transform depending on the occasion, shifting from merely magnificent to utterly imperial. Mary wore the Delhi Durbar many times, even after the Indian festivities were over. But by the 1940s, as taste and style evolved, the crown looked heavy and dated. Before her death in 1953, she passed it to her daughter-in-law, the Queen Mother. And again, the same paradox appeared. In 1947, during the royal tour of South Africa, Elizabeth, then Queen Consort, wore the Delhi Durbar tiara to the opening of Parliament in Cape Town.
It was a moment when the jewel lived up to its name, glittering against the backdrop of colonial power. But it was the only great outing. For the next 55 years, the Queen Mother never wore the cumbersome diadem again. After her death in 2002, the tiara was inherited by Elizabeth II, but the Queen herself never appeared in it. Instead, she followed her characteristic approach. She placed it on long-term loan to Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall. In 2005, just a few months after her marriage to Prince Charles, Camilla astonished the world by wearing the Delhi Durbar tiara at a state banquet for the King of Norway. It was her first great tiara in public. And then it vanished once more. Since that evening, it has been seen only in exhibitions, for instance, during the celebrations of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee in 2012. But neither Elizabeth II nor Camilla ever made it part of their regular image. The Delhi Durbar tiara is a paradox jewel. It was created as the symbol of the most powerful empire on earth, yet proved too heavy, too theatrical for everyday use. Today, it survives as a relic, a reminder of a time when Britain still believed it could stage such spectacles. And so, the Delhi Durbar tiara brings our journey full circle. From delicate garlands of roses to towering emblems of empire, each of these jewels tells a story not only of fashion and craftsmanship, but of power, silence, and the deliberate choice of when to appear and when to vanish. They are more than ornaments. They are fragments of history, sealed in diamonds, carrying whispers of forgotten banquets, abdications, weddings, and funerals. Elizabeth II's vault was not just a treasury, it was a theater of shadows, where jewels became actors who stepped briefly onto the stage before retreating into darkness. Some of them returned decades later, dazzling with renewed power. Others may still lie hidden, waiting for their moment, untouched and unseen. And that is where the true mystery begins. Because in the Queen's vault, there remain countless more pieces, jewels never photographed, never cataloged for the public, never placed upon a royal head. Their stories are still untold. Would you like to hear them? If you enjoyed this journey through the phantom jewels of Elizabeth II, let us know if you'd like to explore more of the hidden treasures of the royal vault, because what you have just seen is only the beginning, and behind those locked doors lie secrets even more dazzling and perhaps even more mysterious.